The great chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the soft vibration of 1,000 different life forms breathing, chittering, and existing in their own unique ways. Ambassador Zexhai of the Valoran Collective adjusted her crystalline throat sac nervously as she reviewed the data pad one more time. The humans have been part of the Council for exactly 3 standard cycles now, and in that time, they had proven to be peculiar. Not dangerous, mind you. At least, that's what everyone believed. The humans were soft, pink creatures who seemed more interested in trade agreements and cultural exchanges than conquest. They had no natural weapons to speak of, no armored carapaces, no venomous stingers, no ability to phase through matter or manipulate gravity with their minds. They were just ordinary. The session will now commence, announced Council Speaker Thrumdoke, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. The 8-foot-tall insectoid's mandibles clicked in the traditional rhythm of order. Today's agenda includes the territorial dispute between the Corthex Mining Guild and the hegemony of Sarlan, trade route negotiations through the spiral arm sectors, and his compound eyes shifted toward the human delegation, the review of humanity's application for expanded settlement rights in the Outer Rim territories. Ambassador Sarah Chun straightened in her seat, her dark hair pulled back in what the aliens had learned was called a ponytail. She was unremarkable by most galactic standards. No impressive height, no natural armor, no obvious predatory features. Just a middle-aged woman in a simple blue uniform. Beside her sat her military advisor, Colonel Marcus Rivera, and their trade specialist, Dr. Elena Vasquez. 3 humans among thousands of aliens, looking almost comically fragile. The human delegation may present their case, Speaker Thrumdoke announced. Sarah rose smoothly, her movements fluid and controlled. Honored Council members, humanity requests permission to establish colonies in systems H-447 through H-503 in the Outer Rim. These are uninhabited systems with suitable planets for human life. We offer our standard agreements for resource sharing and mutual defense. A ripple of what might charitably be called amusement passed through the chamber. The Corthex representative, a creature that looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a mountain, snorted through his breathing apparatus. Mutual defense? What could humans possibly offer in terms of defense? You have no natural weapons, no strong shells, no poison. Your ships are adequate at best. Other council members chimed in with similar sentiments. The Zephyrians, with their ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields, questioned human technological capabilities. The Thacuri, whose crystalline bodies could withstand extreme temperatures and radiation, wondered aloud how such fragile beings could survive in the harsh environments of the Outer Rim. Sarah listened patiently to each criticism, her face maintaining what she had learned the aliens interpreted as calm submission. In reality, she was fighting every human instinct screaming at her to defend her species. But diplomacy required patience, and patience was something humans had learned to master over millennia of evolution. "We understand your concerns," Sarah replied when the chamber finally quieted. "Humanity has always found ways to adapt and survive, regardless of our physical limitations. We believe our resourcefulness and determination make us valuable allies." Resourcefulness, scoffed Counselor Vextera of the Serpentine Dominion. Her snake-like form coiled around her speaking platform, scales shimmering in the chamber's light. "Words. Show us something concrete. What happens when the Devourers return? What happens when a next wave of the plague ships emerges from dark space? How will your soft pink bodies help anyone then?" The chamber fell silent at the mention of the Devourers. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories, ancient machine intelligences that appeared every few thousand years to harvest entire star systems. The last incursion had been 300 years ago, and the galaxy was still rebuilding. The plague ships were more recent threats, bioengineered horrors created by unknown entities that turned entire worlds into twisted nightmare landscapes. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Those who had learned to read human micro-expressions might have noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. The Outer Rim territories we're requesting happen to be along several potential approach vectors for such threats. Our settlements would serve as early warning systems. Early warning systems that would be destroyed in the first wave of any real attack, pointed out Counselor Morin of the Titan Forge Republic. The rock-like being's voice resonated through the chamber like grinding boulders. No offense intended, Ambassador Chun, but your species lacks the physical capabilities to withstand serious threats. None taken, Counselor Morin, Sarah replied smoothly. However, I noticed that your statement assumes human settlements would simply stand still and wait to be destroyed. A few aliens tilted their heads or shifted in ways that indicated confusion. The concept of tactical retreat wasn't unknown to the galaxy, but most species had developed around defensive capabilities, thick armor, powerful weapons, impenetrable shields. The idea of using mobility and intelligence over brute force was less common. Are you suggesting humans would simply run away? Asked Counselor Vextera, a note of disdain in her translated voice. Sarah smiled, and, for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes that might have made a more observant alien pause. I'm suggesting that humans have survived on their homeworld for millions of years not because we're the strongest, fastest, or most well-armed creatures there, but because we're very, very good at staying alive. The casual way she said millions of years caused a stir. Most species measured their civilizations in thousands of years, tens of thousands at most. The idea of a species surviving for millions of years was almost incomprehensible to beings who had achieved spaceflight relatively recently in evolutionary terms. Your records indicate human civilization is only a few thousand years old, pointed out Counselor Zexhai, her crystalline voice chiming softly. Our current technological civilization, yes, Sarah agreed. But humans as a species have been surviving on Earth for much longer. We've survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, and countless other extinction-level events. We've shared our planet with creatures that could crush us with a single bite, creatures that hunted us relentlessly, and creatures that saw us as nothing more than convenient snacks. She gestured to Colonel Rivera, who stood and activated a holographic display. The image showed Earth's surface, then zoomed in to show various landscapes: dense jungles, frozen tundra, scorching deserts, and deep oceans. Earth is what we call a death world, Rivera explained in his calm, professional tone. Gravity is higher than galactic standard. The atmosphere is corrosive to most species. The weather systems are violent and unpredictable. 70% of the surface is covered in a substance that most galactic species find toxic. He paused. We call it water, and we can't survive more than a few days without drinking it. More stirring in the chamber. Most council species came from more stable worlds. Tidally locked planets with consistent climates, gas giants with floating cities, or carefully regulated artificial habitats. The idea of a world that was actively trying to kill its inhabitants was foreign to most of them. But here's the interesting part, Rivera continued, switching to a new display. These are some of the other species that share our world. The hologram showed a massive creature with knife-like teeth and dead black eyes. This is what we call a great white shark. It's one of several hundred species of apex predators that live in Earth's oceans. They've remained virtually unchanged for over 400 million years because they're already perfectly designed for killing. The next image showed a striped cat-like creature. This is a tiger. They can run faster than most galactic species' ground vehicles. They have natural weapons that can cut through steel, and they're nearly invisible in their preferred hunting environment. They've been hunting creatures like humans for millions of years. Another image, a massive gray creature with tusks. African elephant, weighs as much as a small spacecraft, has enough strength to uproot trees, and, despite its size, can move almost silently through dense forest. They're generally peaceful, but when threatened, they have no natural predators except. Rivera paused for effect, then smiled. Humans. The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the usual background sounds of alien breathing and movement had ceased. You see, Sarah said, retaking the speaking platform, humans didn't develop natural armor because we learned to make armor. We didn't develop natural weapons because we learned to make weapons. We didn't develop the ability to run as fast as tigers because we learned to hunt tigers without needing to outrun them. Dr. Vasquez stood and added her own hologram to the display. This is a human persistence hunter. We still have tribes on Earth that hunt using these techniques. They don't try to run faster than their prey. They just keep following it hour after hour, day after day, if necessary, until the prey collapses from exhaustion. We call it persistence hunting, and it's one of the reasons humans developed our particular set of traits. The image showed humans in simple clothing, carrying basic tools, tracking a large antelope across what appeared to be endless grassland. Other predators on Earth hunt in bursts, explosive speed, overwhelming force, ambush tactics. Humans hunt by never giving up. We track wounded prey for days. We follow herds across entire continents. We remember the patterns of animals we've never seen before and predict where they'll go next. She switched to another image. Humans working together to bring down a massive woolly mammoth. We also learn to hunt in coordinated groups. Pack hunting, but with tools, language, and planning that no other Earth species could match. Counselor Morin's rocky form shifted slightly. This is educational, but we're not discussing ancient hunting techniques. We're discussing modern galactic threats. Your primitive ancestors' ability to chase down animals has little bearing on, doesn't it? Sarah interrupted gently. Tell me, Counselor, what do you know about the Battle of Kepler? 442. A murmur went through the chamber. Kepler, 442 was a recent engagement where a joint galactic fleet had fought off a small incursion of plague ships. It had been considered a significant victory. The galactic fleet drove off the threat with acceptable losses, Morin replied carefully. The galactic fleet held the line while human ships hunted down every single fleeing plague ship, Sarah corrected. Ships that other species would have let escape to fight another day. Ships that would have regrouped and returned with reinforcements. Human vessels followed those plague ships for 3 weeks through hyperspace, tracking them through 7 different star systems until not a single hostile unit remained functional. Colonel Rivera stepped forward again. Persistence hunting, counselors. On a galactic scale. We didn't develop the thick armor of the Titan Forge Republic, Sarah continued, because we learned that mobility and endurance matter more than raw defense. We didn't develop the natural weapons of the Cortex, because we learned to make weapons that could adapt to any situation. We didn't develop the psychic abilities of the Zephyrians, because we learned to coordinate our actions through technology and tactics. She gestured to the hologram, which now showed a star map of human territory. In 3 years, humans have explored more of our assigned space than most species explore in decades. Not because our ships are faster, but because we never stop moving. We establish supply caches in systems other species would consider worthless. We map asteroid fields and nebulae that others avoid. We catalog every planet, every moon, every significant asteroid in our territory. Because, Dr. Vasquez added, you never know when you might need to hide, or when seemingly useless terrain might become strategically valuable. The chamber was beginning to understand that they might have misjudged humanity, but they still didn't grasp the full picture. That understanding wouldn't come until later, when events forced the galaxy to see humans as they really were. Your application for expanded settlement rights is noted, Speaker Thrumdoke announced. The council will deliberate and... He was interrupted by an alarm that sent chills through every alien nervous system in the chamber. The harmonic tone that meant only one thing. Incoming hyperspace signatures. Lots of them. The massive display screens around the chamber activated, showing the space around the council station. Dozens of tiers in space-time were opening simultaneously, and from each one emerged ships that no living being wanted to see. Plague ships, black, organic-looking vessels that seemed to writhe and pulse with their own twisted life. Ships that carried bioweapons capable of turning entire worlds into hell's capes of mutated horror. Ships that hadn't been seen in this sector for over a century. All council members to emergency stations, Thrumdoke announced, his voice remaining steady despite the circumstances. Defense fleets are being scrambled. Evacuation protocols are. Belay that, came a calm voice from the human delegation. Sarah-chan was standing perfectly still, but something had changed in her posture, in the way she held herself. Gone was the patient diplomat. In her place stood something that made several nearby aliens unconsciously take a step back. Colonel Rivera, Dr. Vasquez, implement Scenario 7. Acknowledged, Rivera replied, his fingers already dancing over a portable command interface that none of the aliens had noticed him carrying. Ambassador Chun, Thrumdoke said, his mandibles clicking in confusion. This is not the time for... Speaker Thrumdoke, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the chamber. You asked what humans could offer in terms of defense. She smiled, and this time, every alien in the chamber saw what human ancestors had learned to fear in the darkness of the African night. You're about to find out. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. What had moments before been a diplomatic chamber filled with the usual bureaucratic tension suddenly became something else entirely. The humans moved with a precision and purpose that made the watching aliens realize they had never truly seen humans move before. Every gesture had been carefully modulated for alien comfort. Every action deliberately slowed and softened to appear non-threatening. Not anymore. Colonel Rivera's portable interface expanded into a full command console with technology that definitely wasn't standard diplomatic equipment. Dr. Vasquez produced scanning devices that began mapping the chamber and surrounding station with military efficiency. And Ambassador Chun was speaking in rapid human languages to someone off-site, using terminology that the universal translators seemed to struggle with. Words like hunter-killer protocols and target acquisition parameters and persistence tracking algorithms came through clearly enough to make several council members deeply uncomfortable. What is the meaning of this? Demanded Councillor Vextera, her serpentine form coiling defensively. You have no authority to... Counselor, Sarah said without turning from her communications. In approximately 47 minutes, those plague ships will begin bombardment of this station. In approximately 53 minutes, they will begin deployment of bioweapons designed to convert the Council's membership into raw material for their reproductive cycles. She finally turned to face the chamber. Unless, of course, we stop them. The main display screens updated to show the approaching fleet in greater detail. 43 plague ships of varying sizes, moving in formations that suggested they had been planning this attack for some time. Long-range sensors indicated they were already charging weapon systems. The station's defense platforms are powering up, reported Chief Security Officer Graxhall, a four-armed reptilian whose species had evolved from pack hunters. But those ships have heavy biological armor. Our standard energy weapons will have limited effectiveness. Station defenses won't be necessary, Rivera announced calmly. His command console was now showing tactical displays that updated faster than most aliens could follow. Human vessels are moving to intercept. What human vessels? Thrumdoke demanded. Your diplomatic escort consists of 3 light cruisers. They're not equipped for this kind of engagement. Sarah's smile became distinctly predatory. Speaker Thrumdoke, did you really think humans would send their primary diplomatic mission to the galactic capital with only 3 light cruisers for protection? The tactical display zoomed out, and suddenly, the space around the council station was filled with new hyperspace signatures. Not 3 ships, not 10, not 20. 67 human vessels materialized from what had appeared to be empty space. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and ship configurations that the aliens had never seen before. They had been there all along, hidden in sensor shadows, powered down to minimal emissions, waiting. How long have they been there? Whispered Counselor Zexhai. Since about an hour after our diplomatic mission arrived 3 days ago, Dr. Vasquez answered without looking up from her scanners. We don't send ambassadors anywhere without proper support. We just don't usually mention it. The lead plague ship, a massive bioorganic monstrosity that looked like a cross between a warship and a predatory insect, opened communications. The signal was full of harmonics that made most species nauseous to hear, but humans seemed unaffected. Flesh creatures of the Council. The transmission began, each word dripping with what sounded like organic corruption. You will submit to biological integration. Resistance will result in painful conversion. Surrender now, and your consciousness will be preserved during the harvesting process. Several council members made distress sounds. The plague ship's bioweapons were legendary for their horror. They didn't just kill, they transformed living beings into twisted parodies of life that served the plague ship's unknowable goals. Sarah listened to the transmission with the expression of someone reviewing a mildly interesting technical specification. Colonel, please respond to their communication. Rivera nodded and activated the general transmission system. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire star system, reaching not just the plague ships, but every vessel and monitoring station within light years. Unknown vessels. This is Colonel Marcus Rivera of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of the Galactic Council's territorial sovereignty. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and depart this system. The response was immediate. Laughter. Not human laughter, but the wet, organic sound that passed for amusement among the plague ships. Soft pink creatures. The lead ship responded. Your threats amuse us. We have consumed civilizations that spanned centuries. Your species is barely past primitive tool use. Surrender now or face conversion. Rivera waited exactly 30 seconds, then nodded to Sarah. Time's up, she announced. Then, in a voice that carried to every human vessel, all ships, you are weapons free. Engage. What happened next redefined the Council's understanding of warfare. Human vessels didn't charge forward in the traditional manner of galactic fleets. They didn't form up in standard battle lines or attempt to engage in the kind of stand-up fight that most species preferred. Instead, they moved like wolves. The first wave of human ships came from above and below the system's orbital plane, having somehow positioned themselves in the sensor shadows of the system's outer planets. They moved fast, struck hard at the plague ship's flanks, and disappeared back into the dark before the larger vessels could respond effectively. The second wave materialized from within the asteroid fields that most species would have considered too dangerous to navigate. They had been hiding there for days, power down, waiting. These ships carried weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Kinetic projectiles that moved at significant fractions of light speed, guided by targeting systems that seemed to predict their targets' movements with impossible accuracy. But it was the third wave that made the Council members understand they had completely misjudged humanity. The third wave didn't attack the plague ships at all. Instead, they went after something no other galactic species had ever considered targeting: the plague ships' escape routes. What were they doing? Counselor Morin rumbled, his rocky form shifting as he tried to understand the tactical display. Persistence hunting, Sarah replied simply, on a stellar scale. Human vessels had positioned themselves at every hyperspace egress point within a 20-light-year radius. Not just the obvious ones, but every mathematically possible escape vector. Ships that had been moving into position for weeks, power down, and hiding in deep space, waiting for exactly this scenario. The plague ships, meanwhile, were discovering that human weapons had some very interesting characteristics. The kinetic projectiles weren't just designed to damage, they were designed to track. When a plague ship tried to use its biological regeneration capabilities to repair damage, the embedded projectiles interfered with the process. When the ships tried to deploy their bioorganic countermeasures, they found that human weapons had been specifically designed to counter regenerating armor. How did you know? Asked Counselor Vextera, her voice barely above a whisper. How did you know they were coming? Dr. Vasquez finally looked up from her scanners. We've been tracking this fleet for 6 months. They destroyed a human research outpost in the Beta Centauri sector and thought they killed everyone. They were wrong. Her voice carried the kind of cold anger that made several aliens unconsciously step away. They left 3 survivors. 3 humans who spent 4 months in EVA suits, hiding in the wreckage of their station, sending out coded transmissions that tracked this fleet's movements. For months. Zexai's crystalline voice chimed with disbelief. In emergency suits? That's impossible. No species can survive that long in minimal life support. Humans can, Rivera answered without taking his eyes off the tactical display. When we're motivated, the battle was entering its second phase. The plague ships had realized that this wasn't going to be the easy harvesting operation they had planned. They were attempting to form up into defensive formations, but human ships were everywhere, hitting them from angles that shouldn't have been possible, using weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter their biological advantages. Your ships, Thrumdoke observed, they're not fighting to drive off the threat. They're fighting to destroy it completely. Every single ship, Sarah confirmed. Counselor, what do you think happens if we let even one plague ship escape? They go back to whatever nightmare they came from. They adapt to our weapons and tactics. They return with a bigger fleet. Her eyes never left the tactical display. Humans learned a long time ago that some predators can't be scared off. They can only be eliminated. The largest plague ship, apparently the fleet commander, made a transmission that was pure rage and disbelief. Impossible. Your weapons should not be effective against biological armor. Our regeneration capabilities should counter standard galactic weaponry, Rivera interrupted. Good thing we don't use standard galactic weaponry. He smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. We based our anti-biological weapons on Earth viruses. Specifically, bacteriophages, viruses that kill other organisms by hijacking their biological processes. He gestured to the display, where human weapons were systematically dismantling plague ship after plague ship. Turn your own biology against you. It's a very human concept. The battle was becoming a rout. Plague ships were trying to retreat, but human vessels were waiting at every escape route. Not just waiting, hunting. Ships would follow damaged plague vessels for light years if necessary, tracking them through hyperspace until they could be cornered and destroyed. This is... Counselor Morin's rocky voice trailed off as he watched human ships systematically hunting down fleeing enemies with relentless precision. This is not warfare as we understand it. No, Sarah agreed. This is something else entirely. Dr. Vasquez activated a new display that showed the tactical progression from a strategic perspective. Standard galactic doctrine focuses on defending territory, driving off invaders, establishing superiority in key regions. Human doctrine focuses on eliminating threats completely. The display highlighted how human forces had positioned themselves to prevent any escape, how their weapons were designed for permanent elimination rather than temporary victory. But why? Asked Counselor Zexai. The resource expenditure alone. Because, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of millions of years of evolution. Humans come from a world where half measures get you killed, where mercy to a predator means it comes back later with friends, where the choice is simple: eliminate the threat completely or watch it destroy everything you've built. The final plague ship was making a last desperate attempt to escape through a hyperspace jump, but human vessels were already there, waiting in the exact spot where it would emerge. The ship lasted approximately 47 seconds after entering the system. Silence fell over the chamber as the last threat indicator vanished from the displays. Total enemy vessels destroyed, 43, Rivera reported calmly. Human casualties, 0. Collateral damage, 0. Time elapsed, 18 minutes, 37 seconds. 18 minutes, Thrumdoke repeated slowly. A fleet that size should have required hours of engagement. Not if you've been planning the hunt for 6 months, Sarah replied. Not if you know exactly what weapons will be most effective. Not if you've positioned your forces to prevent escape from the moment the enemy arrives. The display screens shifted to show the aftermath. Human ships were methodically scanning the debris, ensuring that no biological material from the plague ships could survive to potentially regenerate or contaminate anything. Other human vessels were already moving to establish a perimeter that would monitor the area for weeks to come. "This is what you meant," Counselor Vexthera said slowly, "when you said humans were good at staying alive." "Partly," Sarah confirmed. "But it's more than that." She gestured to the tactical display. "Every species in the galaxy has developed their own solution to threats. The Titan Forge Republic builds stronger defenses. The Corthex Mining Guild uses its superior firepower. The Zephyrian Collective uses advanced technology." She paused. "Humans make sure the threat never comes back." Dr. Vasquez brought up a new display showing human settlements throughout their territory. Every human colony has early warning systems, hidden supply caches, and evacuation procedures that can move entire populations in hours. Every human ship carries weapons and countermeasures designed for threats we haven't encountered yet. Every human outpost is connected to a network that can track and coordinate response to dangers across dozens of light years. Because, Rivera added, on Earth, the species that survived weren't the strongest or the fastest or the most well-armed. They were the ones that never stopped preparing for the next threat. The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. The soft, fragile humans who had seemed so harmless, so peaceful, so diplomatic, were actually something else entirely. They were a species that had spent millions of years learning how to be the most successful predator on a planet full of creatures that could kill them with ease. "Your application for settlement rights in the Outer Rim," Speaker Thrumdoke said finally. "I believe the Council will find it more favorable upon review." Sarah smiled, and this time there was nothing predatory about it. It was the warm, genuine smile of a diplomat who had accomplished her goals. "Thank you, Speaker Thrumdoke. We look forward to being good neighbors." She paused, "and reliable allies in maintaining galactic security." As the Council session officially ended and members began filing out, conversations buzzed with new understanding. The humans weren't the harmless, soft creatures they had appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous, apex predators who had learned to disguise themselves as prey. And the galaxy was about to discover that having humans as allies was a very, very good thing. But there were other things the Council didn't yet understand about humanity. Things that would become clear in the days and weeks to come as word of the Battle of Council Station spread throughout the galaxy. Things that would change the balance of power in ways that no one could have predicted. The plague ships had been just the beginning. 3 weeks after the Battle of Council Station, the galactic political landscape had changed completely. Ambassador Chon sat in what had once been called the Minor Species Conference Room, but was now hastily being renamed the Strategic Alliance Chamber. Representatives from 47 different species filled seats that had previously been reserved for low-priority diplomatic discussions. The difference was that now, everyone wanted to meet with the humans. The hegemony of Sarlen formally requests a mutual defense pact, announced Chancellor Veltar, her bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns that indicated both respect and anxiety. Recent intelligence suggests that the plague ship incursion was merely a reconnaissance force. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Our analysis confirms that assessment, Chancellor. The main fleet is approximately 6 months behind the scouts." She gestured to Colonel Rivera, who activated a holographic display showing ship movements in deep space. "Current estimates suggest we're looking at approximately 400 vessels." The room fell silent. 400 plague ships represented an existential threat to multiple star systems. The Battle of Council Station had involved 43 ships, and even that had been considered a major incursion. "However," Sarah continued calmly, "we believe this presents an opportunity rather than a crisis." Opportunity. The voice belonged to Admiral Corks of the Draconian Stellar Navy, a species that most closely resembled Earth's ancient legends of dragons. 400 plague ships is a galactic catastrophe, not an opportunity. Dr. Vasquez stood and modified the holographic display. "Admiral, You're thinking like prey. Humans think like predators. The display now showed projected fleet movements, supply lines, and what appear to be carefully calculated intercept courses. A larger fleet means they're committed to this attack. They can't break off easily, they can't change course dramatically, and, most importantly, they've concentrated their forces in one place. Where we can destroy all of them at once, Rivera added with satisfaction. The implications hit the room like a wave. Most galactic species thought in terms of surviving threats, minimizing damage, and maintaining defensive positions. The humans were proposing to eliminate the entire plague ship presence in this galaxy sector in one massive engagement. The logistical requirements alone began trade. Minister Yexhall of the Centauran Commerce Guild are already being handled, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Human logistics doctrine operates on what we call overkill redundancy. We don't just plan for the expected requirements. We plan for 10 times the expected requirements. She activated another display showing human ship movements throughout their territory. Every human colony has been secretly producing warships for the past 18 months. Every human trade vessel carries military-grade sensors and communications equipment. Every human civilian ship can be converted to military auxiliary status within hours. The display showed numbers that made several aliens shift uncomfortably. The humans hadn't just been building a defense fleet. They had been building multiple defense fleets. Hundreds of ships that officially didn't exist, crews that were officially engaged in civilian occupations, and weapon stockpiles that were officially just industrial equipment. You've been preparing for total war, observed Chancellor Veltar, while presenting yourselves as peaceful traders. No, sarà correttamente. We've been preparing for total war while genuinely being peaceful traders. The two aren't mutually exclusive for humans. She smiled. We learned a long time ago that the best way to maintain peace is to be absolutely prepared for war. Admiral Corks's scaled hide shifted color in what his species used to indicate deep thought. Show us the battle plan. The holographic display expanded to show a three-dimensional map of local space. Human fleet positions appeared as blue dots, while projected plague ship movements showed as red arrows converging on several key systems. The plague ships will attempt to establish forward bases in the Kepler sector, Rivera explained. Standard doctrine for their species: secure staging areas, begin biological conversion of local populations, use the converted biomass to fuel their war machine. The display highlighted several star systems along the projected invasion route. However, Dr. Vasquez continued, their projected route takes them through what we call the persistence corridor. The display highlighted a region of space that appeared unremarkable. 17 star systems with suitable gravity wells for hyperspace interdiction, surrounded by asteroid fields and nebulae that provide excellent cover for hidden forces. The true scope of human planning became clear as the display showed the network of hidden bases, supply depots, and sensor arrays that humans had been quietly establishing throughout the region. Not just in their own territory, but in neutral space, uninhabited systems, and even the territories of species that didn't yet know humans were there. When did you establish all of this? Asked Chancellor Veltar, her bioluminescent patches flashing in amazement. We started planning this operation about 6 hours after our first contact with galactic civilization, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. When we realized that the galaxy contained threats like the plague ships, we began developing countermeasures. She gestured to the display. Every human ship that has been exploring or trading in this region has actually been establishing the infrastructure for this battle. You've been conducting a 3-year military operation disguised as civilian expansion, Admiral Corks observed. We've been conducting a 3-year civilian expansion that happens to have military applications, Sarah corrected. Humans don't separate civilian and military infrastructure the way most species do. Every colony can support military operations. Every trade route can become a supply line. Every civilian ship can carry military cargo. The room was beginning to understand just how thoroughly they had misunderstood humanity. What had appeared to be typical civilian expansion was actually the most sophisticated military preparation any species had ever witnessed. But this assumes the other council species will cooperate, pointed out Minister Yexhol. Many species are still uncertain about human methods. Rivera smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Minister, we don't need the council's permission to defend this galaxy. We need their cooperation to do it efficiently. A new voice entered the conversation. And you have it. Every head in the room turned to see Speaker Thrumdoke entering the chamber, followed by representatives from the Titan Forge Republic, the Corthex Mining Guild, the Serpentine Dominion, and a dozen other major powers. The Council's inner circle, the species that actually made decisions for galactic civilization. The Council has reviewed the human battle plan, Thrumdoke announced, his mandibles clicking in formal rhythm. We find it acceptable. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Just acceptable. Terrifying, but acceptable, amended Counselor Morin of the Titan Forge Republic. The scope of preparation, the coordination required, the sheer audacity of proposing to eliminate 400 plague ships in a single engagement. It's either brilliant or suicidal. It's both, Dr. Vasquez said cheerfully. Most human military doctrine is both brilliant and suicidal. We found it keeps our enemies off balance. Speaker Thrumdoke activated his own holographic interface, displaying official council authorizations. Human vessels are hereby granted unlimited access to council space for military operations. Human military forces are granted temporary authority over all galactic defense assets. Human tactical doctrine is designated as primary for all joint operations. The formal language couldn't hide what was really happening. The Galactic Council, representing thousands of species and tens of thousands of worlds, was essentially placing itself under human military command for the duration of the crisis. There are conditions, added Counselor Vextera. Human forces will coordinate with council species. Human tactics will be explained and reviewed, and human post-war expansion will be subject to negotiation. Agreed, Sarah replied immediately. In fact, we insist on full transparency. The more you understand human methods, the better we can work together. Rivera activated a new tactical display. All participating species will receive full briefings on human military doctrine. You'll also receive copies of our threat assessment protocols, our logistics planning systems, and our long-term strategic planning. This caused another stir. Most species guarded their military secrets carefully. The idea of sharing detailed tactical information was almost unthinkable. Why? Asked Admiral Corks. Why share information that could be used against you? Sarah's expression became serious. Admiral, the plague ships are just one threat. Our long-range surveys have detected at least 17 other potentially hostile entities in this galaxy. The Devourers will return eventually. There are machine intelligences in the galactic core that show signs of aggressive expansion. And we've detected energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim that suggest threats we can't even identify yet. The room was dead quiet as the implications sank in. Humans, Sarah continued, have learned that survival isn't about defeating individual threats. It's about building systems that can handle any threat, known or unknown. And the best way to build those systems is to make sure all your allies understand them completely. Dr. Vasquez brought up another display showing human settlement patterns throughout the galaxy. Every human colony is positioned to serve as an early warning system, a logistics hub, or a staging area for military operations. Every human trade route is designed to support rapid military deployment. Every human research station is gathering intelligence on potential threats. But, more importantly, Rivera added, every human facility is designed to support joint operations with allied species. We're not building a human empire. We're building an infrastructure that any galactic civilization can use to defend itself. The scope of human thinking was becoming clear. While other species focused on their own territories and immediate concerns, Humans were planning for galaxy-wide defense against threats that might not emerge for centuries. Show them the deep survey results, Sarah said quietly. Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Are you sure? Some of this information is disturbing. They need to know. The holographic display shifted to show the galaxy from a wider perspective, with markers indicating various threats that human long-range surveys had detected. The plague ships were just one small red cluster among dozens of others. This is what human exploration has discovered in 3 years of galactic presence, Dr. Vasquez announced. Machine intelligences that appear to be strip mining entire star systems. Biological entities that seem to be converting planets into some kind of massive organisms. Energy phenomena that might represent post-biological civilizations with hostile intent. And these are just the threats we can detect. The display zoomed in on various markers, showing detailed analysis of each threat type. Some were immediate concerns. Others appeared dormant, but showed signs of potential activation. Still others were so alien that human science could only speculate about their nature. By our calculations, Rivera said grimly, this galaxy has approximately 50 to 70 years before multiple existential threats converge on civilized space. The plague ship incursion is just the first wave. 50 years, whispered Chancellor Veltar. How can you be certain? Because humans are very good at recognizing patterns, Sarah replied. And the pattern we're seeing is consistent with what happened on Earth during several mass extinction events. She gestured to the threat display. The galaxy is entering a period of massive change. The species that survive will be the ones that adapt quickly and cooperate effectively. The room was silent as representatives absorbed the full scope of what humans were proposing. Not just a military alliance for the immediate crisis, but a complete reorganization of galactic civilization to face threats that most species hadn't even imagined. And you believe humans can coordinate this kind of galaxy-wide defense? Asked Speaker Thrumdoak. Sarah smiled, and for the first time in the conversation, it was completely without predatory undertones. Speaker, humans have been coordinating complex defensive alliances for thousands of years. We've learned to work with species as different as peaceful agricultural societies and aggressive warrior cultures. We've learned to balance individual species' needs with collective security requirements. She gestured to the assembled representatives. More importantly, we've learned that the best defense isn't just being prepared for war. It's making sure that war becomes unnecessary because your enemies know that attacking you will cost more than they can possibly gain. Rivera brought up one final display showing the full scope of human military preparation. The plague ship fleet represents 400 vessels. Current human military assets, including hidden reserves and civilian conversions, represent approximately 1,200 vessels, plus support from allied species. The numbers were staggering. Humans have been secretly building one of the largest military forces in galactic history, while maintaining the appearance of a minor species focused on trade and diplomacy. But here's the real key, Dr. Vasquez said, highlighting different aspects of the display. Those 1,200 ships represent only 30% of total human military capacity. The rest is distributed throughout our civilian infrastructure, ready to be activated if needed. Ready to face threats we haven't even discovered yet, Sarah added. Because humans learned a long time ago that the biggest threat is always the one you didn't see coming. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the fundamental decision had been made. The Galactic Council would support human military operations, not because they fully understood human methods, but because they were beginning to understand that humans thought about threats and defense in ways that no other species had ever conceived. As the representatives filed out to begin coordination with their home governments, Speaker Thrumdoak remained behind. Ambassador Chun, he said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course, Speaker. Are humans actually as peaceful as you claimed when you first requested council membership? Sarah considered the question carefully. Speaker, humans are absolutely committed to peace. We prefer trade to warfare, diplomacy to violence, and cooperation to conflict. She paused. But we've learned that sometimes the only way to maintain peace is to be so overwhelmingly prepared for war that our enemies choose not to fight. And if they choose to fight anyway. Sarah's smile was gentle, but her eyes carried the weight of millions of years of evolution. Then, they discover why humans have never been successfully conquered by any predator on Earth, despite being surrounded by creatures that could kill us with ease. As Speaker Thrumdoke left the chamber, he realized that the galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humans stopped pretending to be harmless. The Battle of the Persistence Corridor began not with the traditional exchanges of fire between fleets, but with something the galaxy had never witnessed before: a coordinated ambush spanning 17 star systems and lasting 6 continuous days. Admiral Sarah Chun, recently promoted from ambassador due to the exigencies of war, stood on the bridge of the UES Relentless, surrounded by holographic displays showing the largest space battle in recorded galactic history. The plague ship fleet had arrived exactly where human calculations had predicted, at exactly the time human models had forecasted, following exactly the route human intelligence had mapped. They flew directly into a trap that had been 3 years in the making. Phase 1 initiation in 30 seconds, announced Admiral Quarks from his flagship, Draconian Fire. The dragon-like admiral had initially been skeptical of human tactics, but 6 weeks of joint training had converted him into one of their most enthusiastic supporters. All non-human vessels standing by for human tactical coordination. Acknowledged, Admiral Quarks, Sarah replied calmly. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency of a predator pack that had rehearsed this hunt countless times. Colonel Rivera, initiate scenario Omega. Omega confirmed. Rivera responded from the tactical station. All human vessels. Execute plan Persistence. No survivors. No escape. No quarter. The first phase of the attack came from weapons platforms that the plague ships never saw coming. Hidden in asteroid fields throughout the corridor, human automated defense systems opened fire with kinetic projectiles that had been accelerating for weeks. By the time they reached their targets, they were moving at 12% of light speed. The lead plague ship simply ceased to exist. One moment, it was a massive bioorganic construct the size of a city. The next, it was a rapidly expanding cloud of vaporized matter. Its escorts fared little better as projectiles designed specifically to counter biological armor tore through their defenses like bullets through tissue paper. First blood to the hidden platforms, reported Dr. Vasquez from her mobile command center aboard the science vessel UES Darwin. Enemy casualties: 47 ships destroyed, 63 ships severely damaged. Our casualties: 0. The plague ship fleet commander's response was immediate and predictably aggressive. The remaining 300 ships accelerated toward what appeared to be the main human defensive line, bioweapons charging for what they expected would be a standard engagement. They never reached the defensive line. Phase 2 began as human ships materialized from hyperspace in formations that shouldn't have been possible, not because the technology was beyond galactic understanding, but because the coordination required was beyond what most species could conceive. 60 ships, moving in perfect synchronization, appearing simultaneously at precisely calculated points around the plague ship fleet. Envelopment complete, announced Captain Martinez from the destroyer UES Persistent. Enemy fleet is surrounded. No escape vectors remain open. But the humans weren't finished. Phase 3 revealed the true scope of their preparation. Now, Sarah said quietly. Throughout the Persistence corridor, civilian ships that had been trading and exploring for months suddenly revealed themselves to be auxiliary military vessels. Mining ships produced military-grade weapons. Research vessels activated targeting systems. Even passenger liners turned out to be carrying marine assault teams. The plague ships found themselves facing not just a military fleet, but an entire civilian infrastructure that had been secretly converted into a military machine. "This is impossible," transmitted the plague ship commander, its bioorganic voice full of rage and disbelief. Your species is barely spacefaring. You cannot possess this level of coordination. Sarah activated the general transmission system, her voice carrying to every ship in the battle. Unknown entity, you made the same mistake every predator makes when they first encounter humans. You assume that because we look soft and weak, we actually are soft and weak. The battle was quickly becoming a rout, but the humans weren't content with simply winning. They were demonstrating something that would reshape galactic understanding of warfare forever. Phase 4, Sarah announced. Begin Persistence Protocol. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships didn't just attack the plague ships, they hunted them. Individual human vessels would single out damaged enemy ships and pursue them relentlessly, following them through hyperspace if necessary, tracking them across multiple star systems, wearing them down through constant pressure until they could no longer function. UES Hunter to Command came a transmission from one of the pursuit vessels. Target designation Plague. 247 has attempted to escape through 3 different hyperspace jumps. We are maintaining pursuit. Estimated time to final engagement, 14 hours. Continue pursuit, Sarah authorized. Maintain pressure until target is neutralized. This was happening throughout the battle zone. Dozens of human ships had broken off from the main engagement to hunt down individual plague ships, with a persistence that made the watching alien crews deeply uncomfortable. It wasn't just military efficiency, it was something primal, something that spoke to hunting instincts that most species had evolved beyond. Admiral Chun came a transmission from Speaker Thrumdoke, observing the battle from the Council monitoring station. Your forces are expending significant resources pursuing individual targets. Wouldn't it be more efficient to allow damaged ships to retreat? Sarah's response was immediate and definitive. Speaker, humans learned a very important lesson early in our development. When you're hunting a dangerous predator, you don't wound it and let it escape. You track it down and you finish it. Because if you don't, it comes back stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. The tactical display showed the scope of human pursuit operations. Plague ships that had attempted to flee were being tracked across dozens of light years by human vessels that simply would not give up. Some pursuits had lasted for days, with human ships following damaged enemies through multiple star systems, wearing them down through constant harassment. This is what we call persistence hunting, explained Dr. Vasquez over the general command frequency. Humans don't have to be faster than their prey. We just have to be more determined. The main plague ship commander was beginning to understand what it was facing. These weren't like the other galactic species that fought defensively, seeking to minimize their own losses while driving off attackers. These were predators that fought to eliminate threats completely. You cannot sustain this level of operations, the plague ship transmitted. Your supply lines, your logistics, your crew endurance. There are limits to what your species can maintain. You're right, Sarah agreed calmly. There are limits to what humans can sustain. She paused. You're about to discover what those limits are. Phase 5 revealed the true depth of human preparation. Fresh ships began arriving from human space. Not just military vessels, but entire civilian fleets that had been converted to support the military operation. Supply ships, hospital ships, manufacturing vessels, and mobile repair facilities. The humans hadn't just prepared for a battle. They had prepared for a campaign that could last months if necessary. How many ships do you have? Demanded the plague ship commander, its transmission now carrying undertones of what might have been fear. All of them, Sarah replied simply. The holographic display updated to show human reinforcements arriving from every direction. Ships from Earth, ships from the outer colonies, ships from trading posts throughout human space. Vessels that had been secretly modified for military operations over the past 3 years were finally revealing their true capabilities. But it was the arrival of the civilian volunteers that truly demonstrated human nature to the watching galaxy. This is Merchant Captain Torres aboard the independent trader Pacific Dream. Came a transmission on the general frequency, requesting permission to join the battle. We've got kinetic weapons and a crew that's ready to fight. This is Research Director Kim aboard the scientific vessel Endeavour. We've got long-range sensors and some very creative ideas about targeting biological ships. This is Captain Wu aboard the passenger liner New Shanghai. We've evacuated our passengers and loaded marine assault teams, ready to board any plague ship that wants to try us. One by one, hundreds of civilian ships announced their intention to join the battle. Not because they were ordered to, not because they were conscripted, but because that's what humans did when their civilization was threatened. The plague ship commander's next transmission carried clear desperation. This is not warfare, as we understand it. You are committing your entire civilian population to battle. No, Sara Directive. We're demonstrating that for humans, there is no distinction between civilian and military when our survival is at stake. Every human ship is a potential warship. Every human crew is potential military. Every human settlement is a potential military base. She paused, because humans learned long ago that half measures get you killed. By the end of the fourth day, the plague ship fleet had been reduced to fewer than 50 vessels, all of them damaged, all of them being hunted by human ships that showed no signs of fatigue or reduced determination. The persistence hunting protocol was working exactly as designed. Admiral, came a transmission from Admiral Corks aboard the Draconian Fire. My sensors are detecting something unusual about human crew performance. Your people should be exhausted after 4 days of continuous operations. Sarah smiled. Admiral, human crews are operating on what we call wartime shift protocols. We can maintain current operational tempo for weeks if necessary. Weeks? The Dragon Admiral's voice carried disbelief. That's physiologically impossible for most species. Most species didn't evolve from persistence hunters, Dr. Vasquez interjected. Human physiology is specifically adapted for extended periods of high-intensity activity. Our ancestors used to chase prey for days across the African savanna. 4 days of space combat is well within our species' capabilities. The 5th day brought the battle's climax. The remaining plague ships, reduced to desperate measures, attempted a coordinated breakthrough toward the edge of the star system. They moved in tight formation, concentrating their remaining firepower in an attempt to punch through the human encirclement. They ran directly into the final phase of human planning. Activate the Omega platforms, Sarah commanded. Throughout the star system, weapon platforms that had been hidden in deep space for months suddenly came online. Not the automated kinetic weapons that had opened the battle, but massive installations that had been slowly maneuvering into position while disguised as asteroids or space debris. Each platform was essentially a mobile military base, carrying enough firepower to destroy multiple capital ships. They had been positioned with mathematical precision to ensure that any attempt to break out of the system would face concentrated fire from multiple directions. Impossible, transmitted the plague ship commander as his remaining forces were systematically destroyed by weapons fire that seemed to come from empty space. How long have you been preparing for this battle? Since we first learned that species like yours existed, Sarah replied honestly. Humans don't react to threats. We prepare for them before they become actual threats. The last plague ship died approximately 6 hours later, tracked down by 3 human destroyers that had pursued it through 2 star systems. The pursuit had lasted almost 36 hours, but the human crews showed no signs of reduced efficiency. Battle of Persistence Corridor complete, announced Colonel Rivera. Enemy casualties, 400 ships destroyed. Allied casualties, 37 ships damaged, 12 ships destroyed, approximately 4,000 personnel wounded, 837 killed in action. The casualty numbers caused a stir among the observing council representatives. In a battle of this magnitude, most species would have expected casualties in the hundreds of thousands. Ow! Asked Speaker Thrumdoke over the communication channel. How did you achieve such favorable casualty ratios? Simple, Sarah replied. Humans don't fight fair. We fight to win with minimum losses to ourselves and maximum losses to our enemies. She gestured to the tactical display showing the aftermath of the battle. We spent 3 years preparing for this engagement. We knew exactly what weapons would be most effective. We knew exactly where the enemy would be most vulnerable. We planned every phase of the battle to maximize enemy casualties while minimizing our own. Dr. Vasquez activated a post-battle analysis display. More importantly, we planned this battle to send a message to any other threats in the galaxy. Attacking human space or our allies isn't just militarily costly, it's completely futile. The scope of the victory was becoming clear as reports came in from throughout the battle zone. Not a single plague ship had escaped. Not one had successfully transmitted tactical data back to wherever they had come from. The threat had been eliminated completely and permanently. This concludes Phase 1 of Galactic Defense Operations, Sarah announced to the Joint Fleet. All ships are to maintain current readiness levels. Intelligence suggests that news of this battle will reach other potential threats within 6 months. We need to be prepared for their responses. Speaker Thrumdoke's transmission carried a note of awe. Phase 1, Admiral, you just eliminated the largest plague ship fleet in recorded history. Speaker, Sarah replied with a smile that the aliens were learning to recognize as distinctly human. The plague ships were just the first test of our new defensive arrangements. The real threats are still out there. She gestured to intelligence displays showing the various existential dangers that human surveys had detected throughout the galaxy. But now they know that this galaxy is defended by humans. And humans, she added with quiet satisfaction, are very good at hunting things that think they're the most dangerous predators in the universe. As the Joint Fleet began the process of returning to their respective territories, word of the Battle of Persistence Corridor began spreading throughout the galaxy at the speed of light. The message was simple, clear, and terrifying to anything that might consider threatening galactic civilization. Humans had arrived, and they were very, very good at their job. 6 months after the Battle of Persistence Corridor, the galaxy had become a very different place. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the newly expanded Galactic Council, now representing over 200 species instead of the original 57. The chamber itself had been rebuilt to accommodate the flood of civilizations that had requested membership following humanity's demonstration of galactic defense capabilities. The Human Council Defense Alliance has achieved its primary objectives, she reported to the assembled representatives. Galactic shipping lanes are secure. No major incursions have been detected in any member territory, and our early warning systems have identified and neutralized 17 minor threats before they could become significant problems. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a loose confederation of species focused mainly on trade disputes and territorial negotiations had become a unified defensive network spanning most of the known galaxy. And at the center of it all were the humans, who had somehow made themselves indispensable to galactic civilization. The Devourer monitoring station's report continued dormancy in the galactic core, continued Dr. Vasquez from her new position as Director of Galactic Threat Assessment. However, our deep space surveys have detected increasing activity from machine intelligences in the outer spiral arms. Estimated time to potential contact, 18 to 24 months. Speaker Thrumdoke, now bearing the expanded title of Council Coordinator for Integrated Defense, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. Dr. Vasquez, please brief the Council on the machine intelligence threat assessment. The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing vast regions of space where stars were disappearing at an alarming rate. Not exploding, not burning out naturally, but simply vanishing as if they were being systematically harvested. We call them the harvesters, Dr. Vasquez explained. Based on spectral analysis of their activities, they appear to be artificial intelligences that consume stellar material to fuel massive construction projects. Our best estimates suggest they're building something approximately the size of a small galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A machine civilization capable of harvesting stars was beyond the comprehension of most galactic species. However, Dr. Vasquez continued with the calm confidence that the Council had learned to associate with human problem-solving harvesters represent a completely different type of threat than biological entities like the plague ships. Their behavior patterns suggest they're focused entirely on resource acquisition rather than territorial expansion or biological conversion. Admiral Chen stepped forward, which means they can be negotiated with, redirected, or if necessary, eliminated using approaches specifically designed for artificial intelligences. Eliminated. Chancellor Veltar of the hegemony of Sarlin flashed patterns of disbelief. Admiral, we're discussing entities that consume stars for raw materials. Chancellor, Sarah replied with a slight smile, humans have been dealing with artificial intelligences for longer than we've been spacefaring. We understand how they think, how they prioritize, and, most importantly, how they can be stopped. She gestured to Colonel Rivera, who activated a new set of displays showing human research facilities throughout their territory. For the past 6 months, human scientists have been developing countermeasures specifically designed for machine intelligences. Logic viruses, paradox bombs, recursive programming traps, and electromagnetic pulse weapons that can disable artificial neural networks across interstellar distances. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear once again. While other species had been celebrating the victory over the plague ships, humans had immediately begun preparing for the next threat. But, more importantly, added Dr. Vasquez, we've been developing communication protocols that might allow us to establish diplomatic contact with machine intelligences. Not all artificial entities are inherently hostile. Some might be willing to modify their behavior in exchange for alternative resource sources. This was a completely novel concept to most council members. The idea of negotiating with star-consuming machines had never occurred to them. Show them the Titan project, Sarah said quietly. Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Are you certain? The implications are, they need to understand the full scope of human preparation. The holographic display shifted to show a region of space in the outer edge of human territory. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard star system with several planets and a yellow star. But as the display zoomed in, details became apparent that made several council members shift uncomfortably. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished entities, Dr. Vasquez announced, I present the Titan Defense Platform. The star in the system wasn't a star at all. It was an artificial construct the size of a star, powered by controlled nuclear fusion, and covered with defensive systems that boggled the imagination. Weapon platforms that could sterilize entire fleets. Manufacturing facilities that could produce thousands of warships per day. Computational centers that rivaled the processing power of small planets. Construction began 18 months ago, Rivera reported. Current status, 67% complete. Estimated completion date, 14 months. Purpose, serve as a mobile defense platform capable of engaging any existential threat to galactic civilization. The silence in the chamber was profound. Humans hadn't just been preparing for the next battle. They had been preparing for any possible battle, including conflicts that might require the resources of an entire star system. How many of these platforms are you building? Asked Admiral Corks, his dragon-like features expressing what might have been awe. Currently, 7, Sarah replied, each one positioned to defend key regions of galactic space. Each one capable of independent operation for decades, if necessary. She paused. Each one powerful enough to sterilize a galaxy if the inhabitants turn out to be hostile. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just building defenses for the known galaxy. They were building defenses capable of projecting power across intergalactic distances. Why? Asked Speaker Thrumdoke. Why this level of preparation? Why these massive resource expenditures? Sarah's expression became serious. Speaker, in the 6 months since Persistence Corridor, human long-range surveys have detected activities in neighboring galaxies that suggest we're not alone in the universe on a much larger scale than anyone previously imagined. Dr. Vasquez activated another display showing the local galactic cluster. Red markers appeared in several neighboring galaxies, indicating detected artificial activities of various types. We've detected evidence of intergalactic travel massive engineering projects that span multiple star systems, and energy signatures that suggest civilizations with technology thousands of years ahead of our own. Dr. Vasquez paused. Some of these signatures are moving in our direction, moving toward us. Chancellor Veltar's bioluminescent patches flashed in alarm. How long before potential contact? Current estimates suggest anywhere from 50 years to 500 years, depending on our method of intergalactic travel, Sarah replied, which gives us time to prepare, but not unlimited time. The true scope of human thinking was becoming clear. While other species thought in terms of planetary defense, star system defense, or at most regional galactic defense, humans were thinking about threats that might come from entirely different galaxies. However, Sarah continued, we're not just preparing for conflict. We're preparing for contact. She gestured to a new display showing human research projects, xenolinguistics programs designed to communicate with truly alien intelligences, diplomatic protocols for entities that might think in ways completely foreign to carbon-based life, cultural exchange programs for civilizations that might be millions of years old. And if diplomacy fails? Asked Admiral Corks. Sarah's smile carried the weight of millions of years of human evolution. Admiral, humans have been preparing for that possibility since we first looked up at the stars. The display shifted to show the full extent of human defensive preparations. Not just the Titan platforms, but hidden weapons caches throughout the galaxy, early warning systems positioned in intergalactic space, and coordination protocols that could mobilize the entire galactic civilization within hours. What you're describing, Speaker Thrumdoke said slowly, is essentially the militarization of the entire galaxy. No, Sarah corrected gently. What we're describing is the preparation of the entire galaxy for any possible future. Military defense is just one component. She gestured to additional displays showing human-civilian projects. We're also preparing for peaceful contact, technological exchange, cultural integration, and cooperative expansion into intergalactic space. Dr. Vasquez brought up displays showing human research into faster-than-light travel, artificial intelligence development, biological enhancement technologies, and engineering projects that would make intergalactic travel routine rather than extraordinary. Humans aren't just preparing for war, she explained. We're preparing for humanity and our galactic allies to become an intergalactic civilization capable of cooperation, defense, exploration, and expansion on a scale that most species haven't even imagined. The scope of human ambition was breathtaking. They weren't content with just defending their current territory or even their current galaxy. They were planning for a future where galactic civilization could expand safely into the broader universe. But why? Asked Chancellor Veltar. Why this drive to expand, to explore, to prepare for threats that might not even exist? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice carried the accumulated wisdom of a species that had spent millions of years learning to survive in a dangerous universe. Chancellor, humans come from a world where standing still means death. Where being satisfied with your current territory means that something bigger, stronger, and hungrier will eventually take it from you. She gestured to the displays, showing the vast scope of human preparation. We learn that the only way to truly be safe is to be so well prepared, so well armed, and so well organized that potential threats choose to be allies instead of enemies. And if they choose to be enemies anyway? Admiral Corks asked. Sarah's smile was gentle, but her eyes carried the accumulated weight of human military doctrine. Then, they discover that humans have been preparing for that possibility for a very, very long time. The council session continued for several more hours, but the fundamental understanding had been established. The galaxy was now defended by a species that thought about threats and opportunities on a scale that dwarfed anything other civilizations had conceived. As the representatives filed out to report back to their governments, Speaker Thrumdoke approached Sarah privately. Admiral, he said quietly, I must ask, are humans actually planning to defend the galaxy, or are you planning to rule it? Sarah considered the question carefully. Speaker, humans have no interest in ruling other species. We're terrible at it, and it goes against everything we believe about individual freedom and self-determination. She paused. But we are planning to make sure that the galaxy remains a place where free civilizations can exist and prosper. And if other species disagree with human methods? Sarah's expression became serious. Speaker, every species in the galaxy is free to leave the Alliance, develop their own defenses, and pursue their own path through the universe. She smiled. But they're also free to discover why humans have never lost a war to a species that tried to destroy us. As Speaker Thrumdoke left the chamber, he reflected on the profound changes that had occurred since humans joined the galactic community. They had arrived as apparently harmless traders and diplomats. They had revealed themselves as the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. And now they were positioning themselves as the guardians of galactic civilization against threats that most species couldn't even imagine. The galaxy had gained more than just powerful allies. It had gained a species that thought about survival, defense, and expansion in ways that would reshape the future of intelligent life in the universe. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their endless patrols. Human scientists continued their tireless research, and human engineers continued their massive construction projects. Because somewhere in the vast universe, there were threats that hadn't yet discovered that this galaxy was defended by humans. When those threats finally arrived, they would learn what every predator eventually learned when it encountered humanity, that the soft, weak-looking species that seemed like easy prey was actually the most successful apex predator the universe had ever produced. The day the Council saw humans in full predator mode had been just the beginning. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be harmless and started building the future they wanted to see. 6 months after the Battle of Persistence Corridor, the galaxy had become a very different place. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the newly expanded Galactic Council, now representing over 200 species instead of the original 57. The chamber itself had been rebuilt to accommodate the flood of civilizations that had requested membership following humanity's demonstration of galactic defense capabilities. The Human Council Defense Alliance has achieved its primary objectives, she reported to the assembled representatives. Galactic shipping lanes are secure. No major incursions have been detected in any member territory, and our early warning systems have identified and neutralized 17 minor threats before they could become significant problems. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a loose confederation of species focused mainly on trade disputes and territorial negotiations had become a unified defensive network spanning most of the known galaxy. And at the center of it all were the humans, who had somehow made themselves indispensable to galactic civilization. The Devourer monitoring station's report continued dormancy in the galactic core, continued Dr. Vasquez from her new position as Director of Galactic Threat Assessment. However, our deep space surveys have detected increasing activity from the machine intelligences in the outer spiral arms. Estimated time to potential contact, 18 to 24 months. Speaker Thrumdoke, now bearing the expanded title of Council Coordinator for Integrated Defense, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. Dr. Vasquez, please brief the Council on the machine intelligence threat assessment. The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing vast regions of space where stars were disappearing at an alarming rate. Not exploding, not burning out naturally, but simply vanishing as if they were being systematically harvested. We call them the harvesters, Dr. Vasquez explained. Based on spectral analysis of their activities, they appear to be artificial intelligences that consume stellar material to fuel massive construction projects. Our best estimates suggest they're building something approximately the size of a small galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A machine civilization capable of harvesting stars was beyond the comprehension of most galactic species. However, Dr. Vasquez continued with the calm confidence that the Council had learned to associate with human problem-solving. Harvesters represent a completely different type of threat than biological entities like the plague ships. Their behavior patterns suggest they're focused entirely on resource acquisition rather than territorial expansion or biological conversion. Admiral Chen stepped forward, which means they can be negotiated with, redirected, or, if necessary, eliminated using approaches specifically designed for artificial intelligences. Eliminated, Chancellor Veltar of the hegemony of Sarlen flashed patterns of disbelief. Admiral, we're discussing entities that consume stars for raw materials. Chancellor, Sarah replied with a slight smile, humans have been dealing with artificial intelligences for longer than we've been spacefaring. We understand how they think, how they prioritize, and, most importantly, how they can be stopped. She gestured to Colonel Rivera, who activated a new set of displays showing human research facilities throughout their territory. For the past 6 months, human scientists have been developing countermeasures specifically designed for machine intelligences. Logic viruses, paradox bombs, recursive programming traps, and electromagnetic pulse weapons that can disable artificial neural networks across interstellar distances. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear once again. While other species had been celebrating the victory over the plague ships, humans had immediately begun preparing for the next threat. But, more importantly, added Dr. Vasquez, we've been developing communication protocols that might allow us to establish diplomatic contact with machine intelligences. Not all artificial entities are inherently hostile. Some might be willing to modify their behavior in exchange for alternative resource sources. This was a completely novel concept to most council members. The idea of negotiating with star-consuming machines had never occurred to them. Show them the Titan project, Sarah said quietly. Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Are you certain? The implications are, they need to understand the full scope of human preparation. The holographic display shifted to show a region of space in the outer edge of human territory. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard star system with several planets and a yellow star. But as the display zoomed in, details became apparent that made several council members shift uncomfortably. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished entities, Dr. Vasquez announced, I present the Titan Defense Platform. The star in the system wasn't a star at all. It was an artificial construct the size of a star, powered by controlled nuclear fusion, and covered with defensive systems that boggled the imagination. Weapon platforms that could sterilize entire fleets. Manufacturing facilities that could produce thousands of warships per day. Computational centers that rivaled the processing power of small planets. Construction began 18 months ago, Rivera reported. Current status, 67% complete. Estimated completion date, 14 months. Purpose, serve as a mobile defense platform capable of engaging any existential threat to galactic civilization. The silence in the chamber was profound. Humans hadn't just been preparing for the next battle. They had been preparing for any possible battle, including conflicts that might require the resources of an entire star system. How many of these platforms are you building? Asked Admiral Corks, his dragon-like features expressing what might have been awe. Currently, 7, Sarah replied, each one positioned to defend key regions of galactic space. Each one capable of independent operation for decades, if necessary. She paused, each one powerful enough to sterilize a galaxy if the inhabitants turn out to be hostile. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just building defenses for the known galaxy. They were building defenses capable of projecting power across intergalactic distances. Why? Asked Speaker Thrumdoke. Why this level of preparation? Why these massive resource expenditures? Sarah's expression became serious. Speaker, in the 6 months since Persistence Corridor, human long-range surveys have detected activities in neighboring galaxies that suggest we're not alone in the universe on a much larger scale than anyone previously imagined. Dr. Vasquez activated another display showing the local galactic cluster. Red markers appeared in several neighboring galaxies, indicating detected artificial activities of various types. We've detected evidence of intergalactic travel, massive engineering projects that span multiple star systems, and energy signatures that suggest civilizations with technology thousands of years ahead of our own. Dr. Vasquez paused. Some of these signatures are moving in our direction, moving toward us. Chancellor Veltar's bioluminescent patches flashed in alarm. How long before potential contact? Current estimates suggest anywhere from 50 years to 500 years, depending on our method of intergalactic travel, Sarah replied. Which gives us time to prepare, but not unlimited time. The true scope of human thinking was becoming clear. While other species thought in terms of planetary defense, star system defense, or at most regional galactic defense, humans were thinking about threats that might come from entirely different galaxies. However, Sarah continued, we're not just preparing for conflict. We're preparing for contact. She gestured to a new display showing human research projects. Xenolinguistics programs designed to communicate with truly alien intelligences. Diplomatic protocols for entities that might think in ways completely foreign to carbon-based life. Cultural exchange programs for civilizations that might be millions of years old. And if diplomacy fails? Asked Admiral Corks. Sarah's smile carried the weight of millions of years of human evolution. Admiral, humans have been preparing for that possibility since we first looked up at the stars. The display shifted to show the full extent of human defensive preparations. Not just the Titan platforms, but hidden weapons caches throughout the galaxy, early warning systems positioned in intergalactic space, and coordination protocols that could mobilize the entire galactic civilization within hours. What you're describing, Speaker Thrumdoke said slowly, is essentially the militarization of the entire galaxy. No, Sarah corrected gently. What we're describing is the preparation of the entire galaxy for any possible future. Military defense is just one component. She gestured to additional displays showing human civilian projects. We're also preparing for peaceful contact, technological exchange, cultural integration, and cooperative expansion into intergalactic space. Dr. Vasquez brought up displays showing human research into faster-than-light travel, artificial intelligence development, biological enhancement technologies, and engineering projects that would make intergalactic travel routine rather than extraordinary. Humans aren't just preparing for war, she explained. We're preparing for humanity and our galactic allies to become an intergalactic civilization capable of cooperation, defense, exploration, and expansion on a scale that most species haven't even imagined. The scope of human ambition was breathtaking. They weren't content with just defending their current territory or even their current galaxy. They were planning for a future where galactic civilization could expand safely into the broader universe. But why? Asked Chancellor Veltar. Why this drive to expand, to explore, to prepare for threats that might not even exist? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice carried the accumulated wisdom of a species that had spent millions of years learning to survive in a dangerous universe. Chancellor, humans come from a world where standing still means death. Where being satisfied with your current territory means that something bigger, stronger, and hungrier will eventually take it from you. She gestured to the displays showing the vast scope of human preparation. We learned that the only way to truly be safe is to be so well prepared, so well armed, and so well organized that potential threats choose to be allies instead of enemies. And if they choose to be enemies anyway? Admiral Corks asked. Sarah's smile was gentle, but her eyes carried the accumulated weight of human military doctrine. Then, they discovered that humans have been preparing for that possibility for a very, very long time. The council session continued for several more hours, but the fundamental understanding had been established. The galaxy was now defended by a species that thought about threats and opportunities on a scale that dwarfed anything other civilizations had conceived. As the representatives filed out to report back to their governments, Speaker Thrumdoke approached Sarah privately. Admiral, he said quietly. "I must ask, are humans actually planning to defend the galaxy, or are you planning to rule it?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Speaker, humans have no interest in ruling other species. We're terrible at it, and it goes against everything we believe about individual freedom and self-determination." She paused. "But we are planning to make sure that the galaxy remains a place where free civilizations can exist and prosper. And if other species disagree with human methods?" Sarah's expression became serious. "Speaker, every species in the galaxy is free to leave the Alliance, develop their own defenses, and pursue their own path through the universe." She smiled. "But they're also free to discover why humans have never lost a war to a species that tried to destroy us." As Speaker Thrumdoke left the chamber, he reflected on the profound changes that had occurred since humans joined the galactic community. They had arrived as apparently harmless traders and diplomats. They had revealed themselves as the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. And now they were positioning themselves as the guardians of galactic civilization against threats that most species couldn't even imagine. The galaxy had gained more than just powerful allies. It had gained a species that thought about survival, defense, and expansion in ways that would reshape the future of intelligent life in the universe. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their endless patrols, human scientists continued their tireless research, and human engineers continued their massive construction projects. Because somewhere in the vast universe, there were threats that hadn't yet discovered that this galaxy was defended by humans. When those threats finally arrived, they would learn what every predator eventually learned when it encountered humanity, that the soft, weak-looking species that seemed like easy prey was actually the most successful apex predator the universe had ever produced. The day the Council saw humans in full predator mode had been just the beginning. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be harmless and started building the future they wanted to see. The emergency beacon cut through the peaceful morning on Earth like a knife through silk. Ambassador Sarah Chun was enjoying her coffee when every communication device in the Terran embassy began screaming warnings in 17 different alien languages. The message was simple, desperate, and sent chills down her spine. The Galactic Council needed help. Real help. The kind that only came from species crazy enough to volunteer for certain death. Sarah set down her mug and watched as the holographic display materialized above her desk. The image showed Ambassador Zeth Kree of the Vorthak Confederacy, his normally pristine blue scales now dulled with exhaustion. His large eyes, usually bright with intelligence, held something Sarah had never seen before in any galactic politician: genuine terror. "Citizens of the galaxy," Zeth Kree's translated voice carried across space, "we face an unprecedented crisis. The ancient weapon systems of the destroyer civilization have awakened. 3-star systems have already fallen. Billions are dead or missing. Our greatest military minds calculate that we have perhaps 30 standard days before the wave of destruction reaches the core worlds." Sarah leaned forward. She had heard whispers about the destroyers during her diplomatic training. They were the galactic boogeyman, a civilization so advanced and ruthless that they had wiped themselves out in their own wars millions of years ago. Their automated weapons were supposed to be myths, ghost stories told to frighten young cadets. We have attempted to negotiate. We have tried every diplomatic solution. The machines do not respond to communication. They do not take prisoners. They do not show mercy. They simply destroy. Zeth Kree paused, his breathing heavy. Traditional military response has proven insufficient. Our most advanced warships are being torn apart like paper. Our energy shields might as well be made of wishful thinking. The transmission shifted to show tactical data. Sarah's blood ran cold as she saw the casualty reports. The hegemony's first fleet, 3,000 ships, had engaged the destroyer machines near the Kepler Nebula. 17 ships had escaped. The rest were listed as vaporized, their crews instantly killed by weapons that turned matter into energy. We need volunteers, Zethkree continued, his voice breaking slightly. We need species willing to attempt what our strategists call extreme probability missions. These operations will require individuals capable of surviving in environments that would kill most sentient beings within minutes. We need those who can endure radiation levels that would cook Vorthack flesh in seconds. We need beings who can function in gravitational fields that would crush our bones to powder. Sarah's hands moved to her tablet before her conscious mind made the decision. She was already drafting a response as Zethkree delivered the final part of his message. We know this request borders on insanity. We know we are asking volunteers to almost certainly die. But if we fail, if the destroyer machines reach the core systems, 60 billion souls will perish. The choice is between certain death for a few thousand volunteers or probable extinction for our entire galactic civilization. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of what she had just heard. Around her, she could hear other embassy staff members making urgent phone calls, their voices a mixture of excitement and dread. Everyone knew what this meant. Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for only 23 years, barely a newcomer by galactic standards. They were still classified as a developing civilization with concerning aggressive tendencies and remarkable adaptability to hostile environments. In other words, they were the Death Worlders. Sarah's tablet chimed with an incoming message from Earth Command. Admiral Rebecca Thompson's face appeared on the screen, her gray hair pulled back severely and her dark eyes holding the kind of determination that had made her legendary during the Titan Wars. Ambassador Chun, I assume you've seen the Council's broadcast. How quickly can you arrange a meeting with the Vorthack leadership? Within 6 hours, Admiral. But are we seriously considering this? The survival rates they're talking about are probably optimistic, Thompson interrupted. Sarah, I've been in contact with our xenobiology teams. The radiation levels they mentioned? Those are the kind we deal with near Jupiter's moons on a regular Tuesday. The gravitational stresses? Our deep-sea workers experience worse every shift. The temperature extremes? Hell, we've got people who vacation in those conditions. Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride in her species, mixed with the usual bewilderment at just how insane humans could be. In her years as a diplomat, she had learned that what other species considered impossible survival scenarios, humans called challenging camping trips. What's our response? She asked. We're going to volunteer, obviously. But I want you to make something clear to the Council. We're not going on a suicide mission. We're going on a rescue mission that happens to be extremely dangerous. There's a difference. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in the Council's emergency session chamber. The Great Dome that usually housed calm political debates now buzzed with panicked energy. Representatives from 47 different species filled the viewing galleries, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, subsonic rumbles, and translated words. Ambassador Zethkree looked even worse in person. His blue scales had taken on a grayish tinge, and his hands shook slightly as he gestured for attention. We have received 17 responses to our request for volunteers, he announced. Most are understandably reluctant. The Cortani have offered to provide logistical support from a safe distance. The Mechanical Collective has agreed to share sensor data. The Ethereal Communion will provide telepathic communication links. Sarah stood up. The Terran Federation volunteers for direct combat operations. The chamber fell silent. You could have heard a feather drop on a gas giant. Ambassador Yixtao of the Serpentine Republic was the first to break the silence. Her snake-like form coiled nervously as she spoke. Ambassador Chun, with respect, are you certain your people understand the parameters of this mission? The radiation exposure alone would be fatal to 99% of known biological forms. We understand perfectly, Sarah replied calmly, and we accept those risks. But why? The question came from Ambassador Keth of the Crystal Alliance, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. Your species has no obligation to risk yourselves for our survival. You have been council members for barely 2 decades. Why would you volunteer for what amounts to a suicide mission? Sarah had been expecting this question. She had spent the flight to the council station thinking about how to explain human nature to beings who had never experienced it. Because, she said slowly, that's what you do when the monsters come knocking. You don't ask who's paying the bills or how long you've known your neighbors. You grab whatever weapons you can find, and you stand between the monsters and everyone who can't protect themselves. The chamber erupted in discussion. Various species debated in their own languages, their translators working overtime to convert the chaos into something resembling communication. Zeth Kree raised his hand for silence. Ambassador Chun, you understand that this mission will require individuals capable of operating in conditions that would be immediately fatal to most council species. The destroyer machines appear to be using some form of exotic radiation as a weapon. Our scientists estimate exposure levels of 30,000 rads per hour in the combat zones. Our miners work in environments with similar radiation levels, Sarah said matter-of-factly. We'll need to brief our teams on the specific exotic particles, but radiation exposure is a solved problem for humans. The gravitational stresses near the destroyer installations vary between 12 and 37 times standard gravity. Our deep ocean crews routinely work at pressures equivalent to 25 standard gravities. Again, it's a matter of proper equipment and training. The combat zones are experiencing temperature swings between absolute 0 and 3,000 degrees Celsius, sometimes within minutes. Sarah actually smiled at that one. Admiral Thompson wanted me to tell you that sounds like a typical day on Mercury base. We'll pack accordingly. More stunned silence. Sarah realized that the other species weren't just shocked by humanity's willingness to volunteer. They were shocked that humans considered these lethal conditions to be routine occupational hazards. Ambassador Threxwin of the Insectoid Collective clicked his mandibles in what Sarah had learned was their expression of disbelief. Your species, you actually live and work in these conditions regularly? Not all of us, Sarah admitted, but enough of us. We've been dealing with hostile environments since we first crawled out of our caves. Every generation, we get a little better at it. Every decade, we push the boundaries a little further. But why? Keth asked again. Why do you do this to yourselves? Sarah thought about her grandfather, who had been a deep-sea welder before the family moved to space. She thought about her cousin Jake, who had spent 3 years on a research station orbiting a magnetar because someone needed to study gravitational lensing effects. She thought about the thousands of humans who chose dangerous jobs not because they had to, but because those jobs needed doing. Because the universe is a hostile place, she said finally, and if you want to explore it, to understand it, to make it a little safer for everyone else, somebody has to be willing to go where it's dangerous. Somebody has to be the first to step into the dark. Zeth Kree's large eyes studied her carefully. And your people, they volunteer for this. Our people fight for the chance to volunteer for this, Sarah corrected. When word gets out about this mission, Admiral Thompson will have to turn away applicants. The hardest part won't be finding humans willing to risk their lives. It will be choosing which ones get to go. The emergency session continued for several more hours. Technical specifications were discussed. Survival requirements were analyzed. Strategic options were debated. But Sarah knew the real decision had been made in the first 10 minutes. The galaxy was asking for volunteers to do the impossible. Humans had raised their hands and said, "When do we start?" As the session concluded, Ambassador Zeth Kree approached her privately. His normally composed, diplomatic demeanor had been replaced by something raw and honest. Ambassador Chun, I must ask you directly, do your people truly understand what they are volunteering for? Our military analysts believe the survival rate for these missions will be less than 5%. Even if the volunteers succeed, most will not return home. Sarah looked at the exhausted alien diplomat and felt a surge of empathy. His people were facing extinction, and he was struggling to understand why humans would risk everything to help them. Zeth Kree, let me tell you about a human named Witold Pilecki. During one of our early global wars, he volunteered to be captured and imprisoned in one of the most deadly concentration camps in history. He wanted to organize resistance from the inside and gather intelligence about war crimes. He knew it was almost certainly a death sentence. He did it anyway because he thought it was the right thing to do. What happened to him? He escaped after 2.5 years, having saved countless lives and provided intelligence that helped end the war. But even if he hadn't escaped, even if he had died in that camp, we would still tell his story. Because that's what humans do. We step into the dark so others don't have to. Zeth-Kree was quiet for a long moment. Your species terrifies most of the council, you know. I know. They call you Deathworlders. They say you come from a planet so hostile that it creates beings who find danger recreational. They're not entirely wrong. But now we need exactly that kind of madness. Zeth-Kree scales had regained some of their blue luster. How quickly can your volunteers be ready? They're probably already packing, Sarah said with a smile. Admiral Thompson knows humans. She'll have put out the call for volunteers before our meeting even started. I'd estimate our first teams could be ready for deployment within 72 hours. 72 hours? Zeth-Kree's eyes widened. Our military estimates, it would take at least 2 weeks to prepare any force for deployment to the combat zones. That's because your military is sensibly afraid of radiation, extreme gravity, and temperature swings that could kill them. Our volunteers grew up swimming in nuclear reactor cooling pools and playing gravity ball in variable G chambers. For them, this isn't preparation for combat in impossible conditions. This is just Tuesday. As Sarah walked back to the Terran embassy, she thought about the message she would need to send to Earth Command. How do you tell an entire planet that the galaxy needs them to do the impossible? How do you explain that they're being asked to volunteer because they're the only species crazy enough to survive it? Then, she remembered Admiral Thompson's words. We're not going on a suicide mission. We're going on a rescue mission that happens to be extremely dangerous. The difference mattered. It was the difference between hopeless sacrifice and determined heroism. It was the difference between dying for nothing and living, however, briefly, for something greater than yourself. The call had gone out across the galaxy, asking for volunteers to face certain death. Only the Deathworlders had the strength to stand. Commander Marcus Rodriguez had been expecting the call. When your service record included tours on Venus Base, 3 years aboard the Solar Research Station Helios, and a commendation for surviving 12 hours in hard vacuum after a shuttle accident, you learned to recognize when the universe was about to ask you to do something monumentally stupid. The message from Earth Command was brief. Report to Titan Base for immediate deployment. Bring radiation gear. Extreme hazard pay authorized. Volunteers only. Marcus smiled as he packed his gear. Extreme hazard pay meant they were going somewhere that would kill most people just by existing there. Volunteers only meant the brass knew exactly how dangerous this was and didn't want to order anyone to their death. It sounded like exactly the kind of mission he had joined the service for. Titan Base was in chaos when he arrived. The orbital facility, normally home to about 300 researchers and military personnel, now swarmed with nearly 2,000 of humanity's most experienced extreme environment specialists. Nuclear engineers from the Jupiter colonies, deep space welders who worked on solar collection arrays, mining crews from the asteroid belt, and combat veterans from every branch of the service. Admiral Thompson stood before the assembled volunteers in the main briefing hall. Behind her, holographic displays showed star charts marked with expanding red zones. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council asked for volunteers to stop an ancient weapon system that's destroying star systems. She began without preamble. They need people who can survive in environments that would kill most organic life forms instantly. They asked for the impossible. A cheer went up from the assembled humans. Marcus grinned. Leave it to his species to get excited about being asked to do the impossible. Here's what we know, Thompson continued, gesturing to the displays. The destroyer machines appear to be automated weapon systems left over from an ancient war. They're not just attacking military targets. They're systematically sterilizing entire star systems. Their weapons emit exotic radiation that breaks down molecular bonds. Their ships generate gravitational fields that can crush conventional vessels. They operate in temperature ranges that would boil most biological compounds. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the base's xenobiologists, stepped forward. We've been analyzing the data the Council provided. The radiation signatures match theoretical models for quantum decay accelerators. Essentially, the machines are using weaponized entropy. They're speeding up the natural breakdown of matter. Which means what? Exactly, called out Sergeant Torres from the back of the room. Which means, Dr. Kim replied, that anything exposed to these weapons ages rapidly at the molecular level. A few minutes of exposure would cause decades of cellular damage to most organic life. Most organic life, Marcus noted. What about us? Doktor, kim similet grimli. That's where it gets interesting. Humans have an unusual resistance to radiation damage, probably evolved from living on a planet with a weak magnetic field and frequent exposure to cosmic rays. Our cellular repair mechanisms are extremely robust compared to most species in the galaxy. Plus, added Chief Engineer Yamamoto, we've been deliberately exposing ourselves to high radiation environments for centuries. Our protective gear, our treatment protocols, our entire approach to radiation exposure is based on the assumption that we'll be working in conditions that would kill most other species. Admiral Thompson nodded. The Council's military estimates suggest a 5% survival rate for these missions. Our own analysis suggests that may be pessimistic for us. We've run simulations based on the environmental data. With proper equipment and tactics, we estimate survival rates closer to 40%. The room erupted in excited conversation. 40% odds of survival sounded pretty good to people who were used to working in environments with 10% margins for error. What's the mission profile? Asked Commander Park, a veteran of the Martian mining colonies. Thompson activated the tactical display. The destroyer machines appear to be following a pattern. They target systems with high concentrations of advanced technology, strip mining useful materials, and adding them to their own infrastructure. They've established 3 major staging areas, heavily fortified positions where they're building new machines. The display showed 3-star systems, each marked with clusters of red indicators. Our job is to infiltrate these staging areas and plant singularity charges. We blow their manufacturing centers. They can't build new machines, and they're advanced ops. Infiltrate how? Asked Torres. Very carefully, Thompson replied with dark humor. The staging areas are surrounded by automated defense networks that fire on anything larger than a small asteroid. Conventional ships get vaporized before they can get close enough to matter. But small, heavily shielded infiltration craft might be able to slip through the gaps. Marcus studied the tactical data and felt a familiar mixture of excitement and terror. The plan was insane enough that it might actually work. Dr. Kim activated another display. We've been working with the Council scientists to develop new shielding technologies. By combining human radiation hardening techniques with alien exotic matter theory, we've created protection suits that should keep you alive long enough to complete the mission. The suits looked like armored space suits crossed with nuclear reactor containment gear. They were bulky, heavily plated with some kind of crystalline material, and covered in sensor arrays. The good news, Kim continued, is that these suits will protect you from the exotic radiation and extreme temperatures. The bad news is that they weigh about 400 pounds each and require constant power to maintain the protective fields. How long can they run? Asked Commander Park. 6 hours under normal conditions. 3 hours in the high radiation zones near the destroyer installations. 90 minutes if you're actually inside one of their facilities. Marcus did the math in his head. 90 minutes to infiltrate an alien fortress, plant explosives, and escape. It was tight, but doable if everything went perfectly, which of course it wouldn't. What kind of opposition are we expecting? He asked. Admiral Thompson looked grim. Unknown. The destroyer machines don't appear to use conventional military tactics. They don't have personnel in the way we understand it. But they do have automated defense systems, and those systems have been very effective against conventional forces. Defined very effective, Torres said. The hegemony's first fleet engaged a destroyer staging area last week. 3,000 ships, some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. 17 survived. The room fell silent. Even by human standards, those were sobering odds. However, Thompson continued, those ships were trying to fight the destroyers conventionally. They approached in large formations, relied on energy shields and heavy armor, and tried to outgun the enemy. All tactics that played directly into the destroyer's strengths. She activated a new display showing small, stealthy craft. We're not going to fight them. We're going to sneak past them, plan our charges, and run like hell. We're going to use tactics they're not designed to counter, human tactics. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus and the other volunteers underwent the most intensive training of their lives. They practiced moving in the heavy protective suits, learned to operate the new explosive devices, and studied everything the Council knew about destroyer technology. The weapons they would be carrying were as exotic as their targets. Instead of conventional explosives, they would be planting micro-singularities, artificial black holes that would consume the destroyer installations from the inside out. Each device was roughly the size of a briefcase and contained enough destructive potential to vaporize a small moon. The triggers are time-delayed, explained Dr. Petrov, the physicist who had helped design the weapons. Once activated, you have exactly 30 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. Minimum safe distance is defined as not in the same star system. What happens if we don't make it out in time? Asked Marcus. You become one with the universe in a very literal sense, Petrov replied cheerfully. The good news is that it will be instantaneous. You won't feel a thing. Marcus had been in dangerous situations before, but there was something uniquely terrifying about carrying a weapon that could kill you just by existing in your proximity for too long. The assault teams were divided into 3 groups, each targeting one of the destroyer staging areas. Marcus found himself assigned to Team Alpha, along with 11 other volunteers, including Commander Park, Sergeant Torres, and Dr. Lisa Wong, a nuclear engineer who had volunteered despite having no combat experience. Why are you here, Doc? Torres asked during one of their training sessions. No offense, but this doesn't seem like your kind of party. Dr. Wong adjusted her practice suit and looked up at the much larger Marine. My daughter is studying on New Geneva. The projections show that if we fail here, the destroyer wave will reach the outer colonies within 6 months. So I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. It was a simple answer, but it captured something essential about the human volunteers. They weren't here for glory or money or even for the thrill of danger. They were here because someone had to be, and they were the only ones who could survive it. The infiltration craft were marvels of engineering, combining human stealth technology with alien material science. Each ship was small enough to be operated by a single person, heavily shielded against detection, and fast enough to outrun most pursuit craft. They were also completely unarmed. Our only defense is not being seen, explained Lieutenant Commander Singh, the pilot instructor. These craft are designed to slip past automated sensors, not fight their way through them. If you're detected, your best bet is to run. What if we can't run? Asked Marcus. Then, you complete the mission anyway, Admiral Thompson said bluntly. The singularity charges don't care if you're alive when they detonate. Dead heroes can still save the galaxy. It was a sobering reminder of just how desperate the situation had become. On the final day of training, Marcus stood in the hangar bay looking at his assigned infiltration craft. The ship was sleek and angular, covered in sensor-absorbing materials that seemed to bend light around them. It looked like something designed by someone who understood that sometimes the best armor was not being there when the enemy looked for you. Dr. Wong appeared beside him, also studying her assigned craft. Do you think we can actually pull this off? She asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. They were planning to infiltrate the most heavily defended positions in the galaxy, plant weapons of mass destruction, and escape before those weapons killed them along with their targets. By any reasonable standard, it was a suicide mission. Yeah, he said finally. I think we can. We're humans, document. We specialize in pulling off the impossible. Even when the odds are against us. Especially when the odds are against us. That's when we do our best work. The next morning, the three assault teams departed Titan Base aboard a Council transport ship. The journey to the deployment zone would take 5 days, during which they would make final preparations and receive updated intelligence about their targets. As Earth fell away behind them, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of fear and anticipation that came before every dangerous mission. Somewhere out there, ancient machines were systematically destroying everything in their path. In 3-star systems, automated weapons were manufacturing new instruments of destruction, and 12 humans in heavily armored suits were planning to sneak in and blow them all to hell. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably hopeless. It was exactly the kind of impossible task the humans had been volunteering for since they first looked up at the stars and decided they wanted to visit them. The approach to the first destroyer staging area took Marcus's breath away, and not in a good way. Through the viewports of the Council transport ship, he could see what had once been the Kepler system, home to over 2 billion people across 4 inhabited worlds. Now there was nothing but debris and the dark silhouettes of destroyer machines. The planets were gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart, but completely gone. In their place, massive geometric structures hung in space like malevolent metal flowers. Each structure was roughly the size of a small moon, its surface covered in construction bays where new machines emerged every few hours. "Jesus Christ," whispered Sergeant Torres, staring at the tactical display. "How'd they do that? How do you just disappear an entire planet?" Dr. Wong checked her readings with shaking hands. The exotic radiation signatures suggest they're using some kind of matter conversion technology. They're not destroying the planets. They're converting them directly into raw materials for construction. Marcus felt sick. 2 billion people, reduced to building materials for alien war machines. It was a level of callous efficiency that defied human understanding. "Contact in 3 hours," announced Captain Veltar, the Council military officer commanding the transport. "Teams Alpha, Beta, and Gamma will deploy simultaneously to maximize our chances of success." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. While the 3 human teams infiltrated the staging areas and planted their singularity charges, Council fleets would create diversionary attacks at the edges of each system. The destroyer machines would respond to the obvious threats, hopefully drawing attention away from the small infiltration craft. It was a plan that required perfect timing and more than a little luck. Marcus strapped himself into his infiltration craft and ran through the pre-flight checklist one final time. The protective suit felt strange, heavier than anything he had worn before, with a constant low hum from the power systems that kept the exotic matter shielding active. "Alpha Team, this is Control." Admiral Thompson's voice came through the comm system from the transport's bridge. "Final mission briefing. Your target is Staging Area Prime, the largest of the 3 construction facilities. Intelligence suggests this is where the destroyers are manufacturing their command units." The tactical display showed a detailed scan of the target. The structure was vast, easily 10 kilometers across, with dozens of construction bays and what appeared to be a central control complex. "Your insertion point is Bay 7, on the facility's lower hemisphere. Scans suggest this area has the lowest sensor density. You'll have approximately 90 minutes from insertion to reach minimum safe distance after charge detonation." 90 minutes. Marcus had time to route during training. It would take at least 60 minutes to reach the central complex, plant the charges, and return to their craft. That left 30 minutes for unexpected complications. In Marcus's experience, there were always unexpected complications. "Alpha Team acknowledges," he replied. "We're ready to go." The deployment was surreal. One moment they were inside the transport ship, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of human technology. The next, Marcus was alone in the void, his tiny craft invisible among the debris fields that surrounded the destroyer staging area. The enemy machines were everywhere. Massive construction ships, moved between the staging platforms, carrying loads of processed material. Smaller patrol craft swept the system in regular patterns, their sensors probing for anything that shouldn't be there. Marcus held his breath as a patrol craft passed within a few hundred meters of his position. According to the engineers, his ship's stealth systems should make him invisible to most sensors. But should and, well, were two very different things when your life depended on the distinction. The patrol craft moved on without pause. The stealth systems were working. The approach to Bay 7 took 40 minutes of careful navigation through debris fields and construction zones. Marcus had to stop twice to avoid groups of worker machines, and once to hide behind a chunk of planetary debris while a massive construction ship passed overhead. Finally, he reached the insertion point. Bay 7 was a vast opening in the staging area's hull, large enough to accommodate ships the size of Earth's largest space stations. The bay was dimly lit, filled with construction machinery and partially assembled destroyer craft. Marcus parked his infiltration craft behind a pile of raw materials and activated his suit's stealth systems. From this point forward, he was on foot. The interior of the destroyer facility was unlike anything in human experience. The corridors were vast and angular, with walls that seemed to absorb light. The air, if it could be called that, was thick with exotic radiation that would have killed most organic life forms instantly. Marcus's protective suit handled the radiation with ease, but he could feel the weight of the exotic matter shielding with every step. Moving in the suit was like wearing medieval armor while swimming through molasses. Navigation was easier than expected. The destroyer facility followed a logical layout, with major corridors leading toward what appeared to be a central control complex. Marcus followed the main thoroughfare, staying alert for automated defenses. He didn't have to wait long. The defense drone materialized out of what Marcus had thought was empty air. 1 second he was alone in the corridor. The next he was face-to-face with a floating nightmare of sensors and weapons. The drone was roughly humanoid in shape, but wrong in every detail. Its surface was covered in sensor arrays that moved like living eyes, and its arms ended in weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. It hovered silently for a moment, studying Marcus with inhuman intelligence. Marcus froze. His suit's stealth systems were designed to hide him from sensors, but this drone was close enough to touch. If it could see through the stealth field, he was dead. The drone's sensors swept over him once, twice, and then it simply moved on, floating down the corridor as if he wasn't there. Marcus waited until it was completely out of sight before allowing himself to breathe again. The stealth systems were working better than anyone had dared hope. The central control complex was a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be organic computers. Massive brain-like structures pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, connected by networks of fiber optic cables. The air hummed with data transfers and computational processes beyond human understanding. This was the heart of the destroyer operation. This was where the machines made their decisions, planned their attacks, and coordinated their systematic destruction of galactic civilization. Marcus activated the micro-singularity charges and began placing them at strategic points around the chamber. Each device was about the size of a briefcase, heavy with exotic matter, and barely contained destructive potential. He worked quickly, but carefully. Dropping one of these weapons would probably vaporize the entire facility instantly. The first charge went on the primary data core, a massive structure that appeared to be the central processing unit for the entire facility. The second went on what looked like a communication array. The third and fourth charges were placed on support systems that seemed critical to the overall operation. As he worked, Marcus found himself studying the alien technology with professional curiosity. The engineering was incredibly advanced, but it followed principles that human minds could understand. Whoever had built these machines had thought in terms of efficiency, redundancy, and systematic destruction. They had also thought in terms of survival. As Marcus placed the final charge, alarm signals began echoing through the facility. Somehow, the machines had detected the infiltration. Alpha leader to team. He transmitted on the emergency frequency. Charges placed but were blown. Status report. Alpha 2 here, came Commander Park's voice, tight with strain. Charges placed at Manufacturing Center 1. Currently avoiding very unfriendly robots. Alpha 3, reported Dr. Wong. Manufacturing Center 2 is wired for destruction. I'm mobile and heading for extraction. Alpha 4, Torres chimed in. Power core is ready to go boom. Running into some difficulty getting out, though. Marcus checked his chronometer. They had been inside the facility for 55 minutes. The charges were set to detonate in 35 minutes, giving them just enough time to reach their craft and clear the minimum safe distance. If they could get out. The corridor back to Base 7 was now filled with security drones. The machines floated in complex patterns, their sensors sweeping continuously for intruders. Marcus's stealth systems kept him invisible, but barely. Twice he had to press himself against corridor walls as drones passed close enough to touch. The route that had taken him 20 minutes to traverse now took nearly 40. By the time he reached Base 7, he had less than 15 minutes before the charges detonated. His infiltration craft was exactly where he had left it, hidden behind the pile of raw materials. Marcus was reaching for the hatch controls when he heard Dr. Wong's voice on the comm system. Alpha leader, this is Alpha 3. I have a problem. What's your status, Doc? I'm pinned down about 200 meters from my extraction point. Security drones have the entire area locked down. I can't get to my ship without being detected. Marcus checked his chronometer again. 12 minutes until detonation. Can you find an alternate route? Negative. The drones have established a perimeter. I'm effectively trapped. Marcus closed his eyes and made the kind of decision that humans were famous for throughout the galaxy, the kind that other species considered evidence of insanity. Hold your position, document. I'm coming for you. Marcus, no. You don't have time. If you don't reach minimum safe distance, then I guess we'd better move fast. Marcus activated his infiltration craft and began flying toward Dr. Wong's position. The small ship's stealth systems were designed for slow, careful movement, not the rapid maneuvering he was attempting. Every few seconds, warning lights flashed on his control panel as the stealth field fluctuated under stress. He found Dr. Wong pressed against a maintenance alcove, surrounded by 5 security drones. The machines hadn't detected her yet, but they were conducting a systematic search pattern that would find her within minutes. Marcus aimed his ship's nose at the center of the drone formation and fired the emergency thrusters. The tiny craft accelerated to ramming speed, its stealth field failing completely as he broke every rule of covert operation. The collision scattered the security drones like bowling pins. Marcus's ship bounced off the facility wall, its hull cracked but still holding pressure. He kicked open the damaged hatch and shouted at Dr. Wong. Get in. Move. Dr. Wong sprinted across the open space and dove into the ship just as more security drones began converging on their position. Marcus slammed the hatch shut and fired the thrusters again, sending the damaged craft careening through the bay's exit and into open space. 7 minutes to detonation, he announced, checking their position relative to the minimum safe distance marker. We're not going to make it. How far short? Dr. Wong asked. Marcus did the math. About 40,000 kilometers. The blast radius is estimated at 60,000. So we're going to die. Probably. Unless. Marcus activated the ship's emergency systems and began overriding safety protocols. Doc, how much do you know about emergency power management? Enough. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we dump everything we've got into the engines. Life support, artificial gravity, inertial compensation, everything. We'll have about 3 minutes of consciousness in hard vacuum, but we might just reach safe distance. Dr. Wong nodded grimly. Do it. Marcus routed all available power to the engines. The small craft began accelerating at forces that would have been lethal without their protective suits. The hull groaned under stress, and warning lights flashed as systems began failing throughout the ship. Behind them, The destroyer's staging area continued its normal operations, unaware that in 3 minutes it would cease to exist. 2 minutes to detonation, Marcus announced. Distance to safe zone? 30,000 kilometers and closing. The ship's hull began to crack under the extreme acceleration. Atmosphere leaked out through stress fractures, and the internal temperature began dropping rapidly. Dr. Wong's suit systems activated emergency protocols, sealing her inside a protective cocoon. 1 minute to detonation. 20,000 kilometers to safe zone. The engines were running far beyond their design specifications, burning through reaction mass at unsustainable rates. Marcus could see system failures cascading across his control panel, but the ship kept accelerating. 30 seconds. 10,000 kilometers. The ship was coming apart around them. The hull was more cracked than solid metal. The engines were on the verge of complete failure, and they were still inside the blast radius. 10 seconds. 5,000 kilometers. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about home, about Earth, about the billions of people throughout the galaxy who were depending on a few humans to do the impossible. Detonation. The universe went white. The micro-singularities detonated simultaneously across all 3 destroyer staging areas, releasing energies that had been contained since the birth of the cosmos. The ancient alien facilities, with their impossible technologies and their systematic destruction of civilizations, simply ceased to exist. Marcus woke up in a council medical facility, his body aching from radiation exposure and acceleration trauma. Through the window, he could see stars, normal, stable stars, not the hellish glow of destroyer weapons. "How long was I out?" he asked the medical technician. 18 hours. You're lucky to be alive. The blast wave from the singularity detonation caught you just at the edge of survivable range. The others? All teams successful. Casualty rate was lower than projected, about 20%. Commander Park and Sergeant Torres are in the next ward over. Dr. Wong is asking when she can go back to work. Marcus smiled. Of course she was. Through the medical facility's communication system, he could hear news broadcast from across the galaxy. The destroyer threat had been neutralized. The ancient weapons were silent. Billions of lives had been saved by a few dozen humans who had volunteered to do the impossible. As he lay in a medical bed, Marcus thought about Ambassador Chen's words during the initial briefing. We step into the dark so others don't have to. The galaxy had called for help. Only the Deathworlders had the strength to stand. And they had stood.